Why are used Jaguars so cheap? When you look at the market, you're finding prices going off a cliff. You start to wonder, hey, if I can get a vehicle that's 50% less than it was brand new and it's only 2.5 years old, why wouldn't I buy one? I'm gonna explain those 5 reasons why used Jaguars are so cheap and why, in fact, I sold the one that I owned too. Let's get into it now.
Life's too short to drive boring cars.
The first reason comes down to one that everybody talks about, and it's reliability. I mean, these are gorgeous cars. Here we have an SVR, as you'll notice right there, Jag SVR, beautiful. This is one of their most beautiful engines. Of course, it barks out great noises. This features a supercharged 5-liter V8, and I had the exact same engine in my F-Type R that I just sold, and I want to explain that after. But these vehicles are absolutely gorgeous. You get the big red calipers. Of course, look at the tailpipes. Of course, this is their beautiful F-Type, and it has some of the nicest, most glorious lines to it. Has a revised interior as well, so they've made some changes. It's gone through a bit of a facelift, and it's a gorgeous looking vehicle, but they don't come without some troubles. The 5-liter V8, there's been allegedly some issues with timing chains rattling. Specifically, we also have O2 sensors. We know those are failure points. When I owned my vehicle, there was lots of talk on the forums. Of course, fuel injector failures. They're direct injected. They get very expensive. Fuel pump issues. Of course, the rear differential on the F-Type R and many other Jaguars have leaks. They have vented systems, and if you don't properly clean out the vents, they've been known to pile up their electronic differentials, and they're a little bit fragile. The engines are nice, but there's coolant leaks, of course, as well. The Y pipes in the front, of course, which run coolant in there, known to crack and split with some of the earlier generations. There was an update for that. But if it wasn't coolant leaking, if it wasn't oil leaking, there was blowing out differentials as well. Some of these vehicles have the flip out handles. This one here does not. But a lot of these Jaguars have issues. And vehicles like this gorgeous XJL as well, loaded with problems. Here we talking a 3.0 all-wheel drive, of course, supercharged V6. We have seen tons of issues, electronic problems, sunroof issues, infotainment problems, and of course all kinds of electrical issues, mechanical problems as well. And there have been cases of thrown rod bearings and catastrophic engine failures in some of these vehicles. Look, even this one here has half the dashboards pulled apart because it's going through some kind of overhaul. And while Jaguar has some beautiful vehicles and arguably some of the nicest in the market, they definitely come with a caveat, and that's significant repair costs. Every time I took my vehicle into the shop, it cost me $1,800, $2,000, $2,500, and that was just minor maintenance. Oil services, of course, you had to do some filters, brake work, and the general cost of ownership is extremely high. We can't forget as well that unfortunately Jaguar and all of the models within the brand generally sit in a position low on the reliability record. Consumers Reports, JD Powers ranks them quite low, swapping punches with the likes of Alfa Romeo, Maserati, as well as even Chrysler. That's right, Stellantis products alike. So while I personally loved owning my F-Type R, and I still stand that it's one of the most exciting and exhilarating vehicles on the market, it definitely came with a huge expense for annual repairs, the imminent fact that there could be a failure just around the corner, and even weird issues with some of the vehicles having drive shafts that were too short and would shear the bolts, meant that it just really questioned whether these vehicles were well designed in the first place. And many of these vehicles don't even make it to 100,000 miles. What we essentially have here looks to be a parted out vehicle. We have tanks there, we have all kinds of components, suspension parts, frame parts, even the bottom floorboards. We have drive shafts, mufflers, all kinds of parts. We have injector components. We even have a sunroof here and all kinds of body panels here. Everything under the sun. You could probably build yourself a brand new Jaguar from all the parts in this bin. And so it leaves a lot to be desired with the overall durability, longevity, reliability of these vehicles when you suspect, and you've seen examples of many cases where they don't make it over 100,000 or 110,000 miles. It just lacks the inspiration to believe that if you buy a car with 30 or 40,000 miles that you're not going to even get it to 100,000 miles. That makes people worried. You spend a lot of money on these vehicles and then they don't even last. That certainly does not inspire a lot of confidence. And the next issue is the limited dealer network availability. A lot of people, when they buy a vehicle, new or used, they like to think that there's going to be adequate support. And while the dealers usually have been very good by my personal experience, the point is if you live in a smaller town or some area that has a limited access, it just makes it difficult to service your vehicle. I mean, you get all of these great vehicles and it's wonderful to buy these. They're sold in mass abundance, but the reality, a lot of these vehicles, if you can't get them serviced properly, maybe you live in a rural area where you have to get it towed in because you're, say, 150 kilometers outside of town, you live on an acreage or a farm, that just basically isolates that buyer. Most people want something that they could drive it to the dealership, no muss, no fuss, without piling hundreds of miles just to get it to the dealership and back for a basic oil service. The bottom line is, unless you live in a large city or a large center, a lot of people feel that having a couple of dealerships nearby you means that it's something to consider. If there's not a dealership in your city, then a lot of people just simply don't buy it. And for those niche buyers who are in fact making the decision to buy a JLR product, a lot of those buyers just recognize that there are challenges and limitations, but unfortunately that small niche buyer is letting that vehicle go after a couple short years, and what you ultimately have left is a used vehicle. After the lease is up or that buyer decides to trade it in, where does that used vehicle go? They're just loading onto the market, a market that's very small and tight. Not a lot of buyers looking for those vehicles on the used car market, and naturally that drives the prices down. And right here is an example of Jaguar's approach at producing an electric vehicle. We have the I-Pace right here, but it doesn't begin and end here. Unfortunately, this vehicle did not fare all that well in sales. Neither did the rest of the brand, but this one did particularly poorly. Nobody was really looking for EVs anyway in the market, and unless you were one of the OGs with a Tesla, a lot of these other brands like Jaguar and Mercedes and BMW that started producing electric vehicles found out the hard way that very few people wanted them. So what did Jaguar go out and do? Because of poor sales, not just their EVs, but their SUVs, their sports cars, and the F-Type, the F-Pace, the E-Pace, and just about everything in between, meant that they were not selling that many. They had high days supply, vehicles were not moving, so they decided to rebrand themselves. And so it's not uncommon for a lot of manufacturers to decide at some point they need to rebrand, change their logos on the back, make it look a little different. You know, we've seen Kia go through that. They changed their actual logo on the cars, make it lively, make it interesting, freshen it. So customers see something and they think it's something exciting and something fresh and new, so it gets people in the door. But unfortunately, Jaguar, in all of their wisdom, decided to go a little step too far. And if you haven't happened to see some of the rebranding efforts, they came out with something that isn't just an effort to produce something that's a little bit more niche, a little bit more upscale. I mean, Jaguar has always been known to be one of these brands that produces vehicles that are certainly more for the well-heeled, the luxury vehicle lovers type of vehicle. You know, something that certainly appealed to those that had a bigger bankroll. Unfortunately, they are going even more upstream. They are going to something that's even more niche, more unique. And if they thought they weren't making sales before, they may find themselves even more of an uphill battle, because it's not just the price tag that they're putting to these vehicles. It's not just this unique styling efforts that they're putting on some of their new vehicles. Some of the big challenges, even their marketing approach now with some of these colors and symbols and logos and designs, seems to be leaning in a direction that some love it and some don't. They're trying to create a much more polarizing experience, but because they're doing such a massive overhaul on the brand, the look, the design, the theme, and the marketing in general, just leaves a lot of people wondering, do I want to be part of that or not? Do people want to get on board with all of the older inventory, the older product line? Chances are not. I mean, you either hate the brand because of what they're doing and what they're marketing at, so you want nothing to do with it and you're selling your product off, or you love it and you're liking the new look and the redesign, and chances are you're not going to buy the old product because you're probably going to wait for the new product line to show up at showroom floors. So ultimately it leaves a lot of their current generation stuff orphaned in a place where nobody's really looking for it anymore. And as amazing as some of these F-Pace vehicles are, and the new refresh, the new facelift, and the new interior design has come a long ways, these vehicles are actually very, very nice to drive, and they certainly need a look. The problem is a lot of people are simply not looking for this brand anymore. The next reason why a lot of used Jaguars are so cheap on the used market comes down to incentives on brand new vehicles. I mean, why in fact would you buy yourself a 2 or 3 year old vehicle that maybe has 30 or 40,000 miles on it when you can get incentives of 84 months, as well as they're offering at 4.99%? Think about it. You go and buy yourself a used vehicle like this with a few miles on it, nobody's going to give you a bank rate less than 12 or 13% these days. So if you're looking at something like that, you know you're going to pay a lot more in interest charges, especially when you're dealing with a long loan term. as a lot of people often do, because a lot of these vehicles are quite expensive brand new. It's not uncommon to spend $80, $90, $100, $130,000 for a new Jaguar. And in doing so, a lot of people have to spread out their loan terms. 84 months is not uncommon. So as you spread that out, that puts people at a bigger risk financially. Negative equity. Nobody wants part of that. Of course, buying them new never represents a good buy anyway from that perspective, but buying slightly used is also equally inept in the sense that you're quite often still paying a significant amount of money for that slightly used vehicle, but you're paying at a much higher interest rate. Now, there are a caveat to that. If you're a buyer that can go in cash, you can save a huge amount of money on a slightly used Jaguar. There's no doubt. When I bought mine a few years ago, I bought it was a 2018 and I bought it in 2020. I signed on the dotted line and picked it up. It was 2 years old and I paid $70,000 for a $130,000 vehicle. That was a great deal. But if you're paying and borrowing money from the bank for a vehicle that's a year or 2 years old, you might find yourself still paying $70,000 or $80,000, and doing so at a high interest rate could in fact put you in a position where don't even bother, because a lot of times just buying them brand new just makes more sense. So it sort of depends. If you have the money on hand, you're great. If you're a typical buyer and you're borrowing it on a lease or a finance, there's a chance that you're probably just going to buy it brand new. With the lowest interest rate, you're going to get the better deal. As well, leases, of course, lots of great incentives on leases, which is pretty much excludes the used car buyer. So at this price point, a lot of times people just decide to lease them because the reputation of reliability and because the overall cost, they put them under the business. When the warranty's up, the lease is up, and they say bye-bye. The next reason why Jaguars are so cheap on the used car market, this is one example. Mercedes-Benz creates a great vehicle. There's lots of different vehicles to choose from. So does Genesis, of course. We'll notice right here, which is an upscale Hyundai brand, which is also a luxury vehicle. Infiniti makes products too. General Motors, Buick, there's another luxury brand as well. But even stiff competition from its brothers, Land Rover, of course, Discovery, or even a Range Rover and a Sports, those are all direct competitors to the Jaguar brand like we see over there. And that's the bottom line. There's way too much brand out there. You got Mercedes, BMW has cars, SUVs, everybody's putting out EVs. Of course, whether you want an Audi or you want, doesn't matter. Porsche makes some great products too, and actually has a higher level of reliability. But if you really get down to it, if people are getting a little shy with spending their money on unreliable vehicles because they don't have the money to throw away like even they did. So people are a little bit more cautious, treading lightly. Now, yes, there's still people spending like drunken sailors, but realistically, there's a lot more people that are more savvy. They're starting to think and ask questions. With vehicles still like Acura or Lexus, producing vehicles that might be not quite as luxurious, may not feel quite as nice to the touch, they add all of that levels of reliability and longevity within their vehicles and their designs. And that's just something Jaguar has not been able to match ever. Now, they're not as bad as I personally found in the ownership of my F-Type. It's not as bad as a lot of people say, but I did sell my vehicle with only about 58,000 kilometers on it, and who knows what the long-term reliability is on an F-Type. But overall, reliability is something that people actually care about, and the competition is fierce. You get vehicles like the GLS, the GLC, the GLAs. You get cars S-Class, C-Class, CLAs, E-Class. There's just way too much competition on the market, and the market is thinning itself out. There's more and more different brands showing up every single year. Now, of course, the EV market is stealing a little market share, and that just means a lot less money to go around, a lot less customers and buyers. And Jaguar, which is a niche brand, which is already struggling to sell products, now they're spread even thinner. And hence the rebrand. They're trying to shake it up, trying to get more eyes back on the brand, of course, trying to get people back in the door, which has been a struggle and has been on a downhill climb since 2017 or so. 6-speed reviews. I've reviewed a brand new F-Pace, and it's the redesign. It's a gorgeous vehicle. I absolutely adore it. But the problem is, it's just, there's too much competition out there, too many great vehicles out there to choose from, and certainly with a shrinking marketplace and a market share, it just means that the brand is struggling. So with that said, when people are looking at used vehicles on the used car market, they're looking for value, and people are looking for that comfort. They're looking for reliability. They want a vehicle that they can trust, that they know are going to get some miles out of. And unfortunately, all the reputation and all these other challenges means a lot less people are sure about spending their money on a used Jaguar with 80,000 miles on it. Rather, they would just put it into something that's a little bit more sure. But I do have to report that I did in fact sell my F-Type. That's right, my branded intro, of course, is my F-Type R, and I've just sold that car this year. I was asked recently, do you regret it? In a lot of cases, absolutely, I regret selling it. I love that car. It was one of the best, most exciting performance cars I've driven, still to this day. I still find it more exciting than a car like a Corvette C8, although those are wonderful cars. I found the F-Type R with that supercharged snarly V8 just absolutely one of the best sounding cars. I had the all-wheel drive version because mine was a 2018, so it had grip for days and power for months. I had lots of people give it the thumbs up. It looked spectacular. It almost looked supercar-like. It was fun, it was luxurious, it was easy to drive, and it had all the luxury appointments that I could possibly dream of. I absolutely love that car, and I truly do believe it is still one of the best cars that you could possibly get in that price point, bar none. I do believe the F-Type R, or F-Type in general, is still an amazing vehicle. So why in fact did I sell it? Was it the rebranding? No, don't really care because I liked the car so much the way it drove. Was it the fact of reliability? Well, my car was actually pretty reliable. Although there was reputations for poor reliability and Jaguar as a brand, I personally didn't have any real issues. Maintenance costs were high. I was used to that, but I fully anticipated and expected it, so I sort of knew what I was getting into. Was there a problem with financing or any of that? No, I bought my car almost cash, so I didn't have to worry about the cost, the losing money on the deal. I wasn't making payments on it. It was an absolute great vehicle that I just didn't have to pay a ton of money on. So why did I sell that vehicle? As the miles were getting up there, I just started thinking about some facts. It's going to start getting expensive. It will start to. I mean, we know that a lot of these cars do get pricey. Big tires, big brakes. Of course, everybody talks about O2 sensors, fuel injectors, cracked Y-pipe, and mine still had the original Y-pipe, and they even wrote me up an estimate or an invoice for a potential quote to change that out. I was also starting to get noise, a little bit of that slight rattle. They talk about the snorkel spring because the supercharger, mine wasn't bad yet, but that's another maintenance item or another repair component that people talk about. The rear differential, yeah, I never had any issues, but there's a lot of these little nickel and dime items that start to add up to huge dollars. And I knew, looking down the barrel of this vehicle and having to own that vehicle, and I had almost 60,000 kilometers on it, I suspected that the time would come where I'd start pouring money into it. I loved driving it, but the more I drove it, the more miles I put on it. The more miles you put on, the more you worry about putting in expensive parts to replace. You get the gist. It's still got some inherent value to it. Let's sell it. I'll give it to another awesome owner who bought it. The new owner, absolutely great person, great guy, and he's going to love it because I absolutely took care of my car. That being said, why else did I buy it? It's because I have another car coming. And do I truly believe in life's too short to drive boring cars? 100%. Do I talk about reliability and depreciation? Yes, those are all important factors. Nobody wants to drive a Lamborghini that's breaking down every day. So you want to consider vehicles that are reliable. That's why I talk about Toyotas and Hondas. Everybody drives a daily vehicle. Nobody drives their Lambo every day. So the idea behind having something fun is always going to sit in my garage, but I always have to consider reliability. It's always important to everybody. Nobody wants to be throwing money down the drain. So on that note, yes, I regret selling the F-Type, but on the other side, something new and fresh is coming to the channel. And with all of that said, if you're curious about why used Teslas are so cheap and why Mercedes-Benz are so cheap on the used car market, I've got you covered. Hope to see each and every one of you in the next one. See you real soon. Bye-bye.